Hi, this is Leah Melby Clinton, founder of Diana, the only private women's group devoted to community, creativity, and holistic entrepreneurship. And this is the Diana Pod. Anyone can listen in, but only members receive the special homework designed to accompany each episode. Interested in joining us? Find out more about membership, including our in-person events and private group chat at joindiana.com. Hi, everyone. This is Leah Melby Clinton, and you've accessed the Diana Pod. Today, I'm chatting with my friend Emily Landers, the voice and brain behind the How'd She Do That podcast. Emily is an inquisitive interviewer and someone who knows a thing or two about entrepreneurial women building something that takes grit, determination, and perseverance. She's also someone juggling a full-time, high-level job alongside her podcast empire, a push and pull and juggling act that always is worthy of note. She's also one of those women who is more lovely and authentic and warm offline than you're even expecting. If you're a member of Diana, you'll receive a custom worksheet designed to really help you dig into this episode and everything we talk about, as well as your always-on invitation to our monthly chat to talk about this episode in person. If you want to know more about membership and find out when we're accepting applications next, find out at joindiana.com. Now let's get started.
We were just talking before. I was like, how long have I known you now? And it seems like maybe 3 years. You've been so instrumental in just continuing our friendship. You're so sweet and thoughtful. And I'm just so excited to be able to have time with you today.
I was thinking about you this morning too. And I was like, it's so funny / lovely, I think, if you can't even remember the first time you met people. You know, when you were talking about friends, especially internety friends, and you're like, I don't know how they first came into my orbit or when I first met them in person.
Yeah.
Because that has to be the best thing with so much social of like all the gunk and the junk and stuff that can happen.
Totally.
But when you meet people and you're like, this person randomly messaged me and now we're friends.
And now we literally brainstorm our futures together. I mean, that's something that I've loved about our friendship is just even, going on a walk and calling you and saying, okay, this is the trajectory. Here's where we could go. And then with all that you've done, I mean, I'm excited even to hear some of the updates from you. So it's cool for those of you who are listening and have a girl crush on Leah. You should. She is everything you think she is, which is what makes her such a great friend.
Oh, ditto back to you, Emily. I was thinking about you, right? Because, my background and stuff is with journalism. So I love interviewing people. And that's so much of what you have built your whole business around. I then like talking to people who even do what you do a lot because you're like a super uber dictionary encyclopedia of wealth because you've distilled it and taken it from so many people, right? It's great interviewing accomplished, fascinating women, period, as you very much know. But it's so cool when you can talk to someone who's kind of a treasure trove. So that's what we're doing today, which is different than anything else you've done on the Diana Pod and chatting with experts. Usually we kind of go in with this very focused, what's something you know. I do a lot of coaches, right, for topics and things kind of consuming our members' lives and conversation spaces and the group chat and stuff. But we're just going to pepper in everything. So
I love it. I'm ready.
Super excited. I know you did some digging at looking how many interviews, episodes of your podcast you've done, and it's a large number.
It's a large number. We are at 242, but that's not quite right because I didn't count them exactly in the early days, how I do now. So we're probably we're at like 340 episodes probably, but around 250, personal one-on-one episodes with incredible women. So,
it's
wow.
Amazing. I know. And it's nice. I mean, I think that is like also right. The first kind of piece of good lived advice is to take those moments too of looking back and recognizing what you've done or built. Because I think a lot of people, you're busy living and you're busy doing it, and you move that bar or the finish line or whatever on yourself, and that
Totally.
People just don't take enough time to recognize it's incredible. To start the idea period is incredible, and then to keep going.
Yes.
To 300 plus.
Yes. Weekly episodes for 5 years. That's crazy. It is. And it is good to do that. And I think that's actually a theme that a lot of women say when they come on the show. They're like, make sure you take pause and look around. And to your point of what you just said, even recently I had someone on and they said, even you just starting something is amazing. You've done something further than others because others are just thinking. So that starting element is something to celebrate as well.
I think that's it. It's absolutely true. And I often think about, I don't know if you got this advice too before you got married, where people were like, my best advice in your ceremony or your reception or whatever, try to take time to like stand back and look at it.
Yes.
So lovely. And it's also just so true of life because you don't. And it's almost cruel where I think that people who are doing this stuff are so wired to be
Mm.
achievers and ambitious and to kind of not look back because you have to look forward or whatever. But there's such amazingness in reminding yourself, because your confidence gets whacked along the way a lot.
Yeah, definitely it does.
Yeah.
And it depends on what you measure success with, right? If you focus so much on finance, especially on a creative endeavor like a podcast, then you can very swiftly be deterred or have a negative look on it and think, okay, well, how can I do this? And that's something I've constantly shared with people, is how to figure out how to create not only a podcast, but make it a business. You can make any creative endeavor a business, but it's going to take time. And along the way, you may realize, okay, I need to pivot. I need to do this. I need to do a more traditional route of this. And as you navigate all of that, it's fun too.
Okay, well, so we bucketed this into three things. And so we can just get into that first one, which is about building a business. And I think too, probably most of your guests own kind of, doing their own business, but I'd also imagine a lot of them have experience prior to that, right? So I think even it doesn't have to just be about building your own thing, having a startup, having your own company, however you want to say it, but just in general to work advice. How, when you were reflecting, going back while prepping for our little conversation, was there one or two or a few that like super stood out to you as just like, this thing when someone said has not left my brain or really impacted, how you do things or think about things? Or was there like a super winner or?
They're all super winners. They're all amazing. But no, one had a huge life impact on me, and it's actually episode 1 of the podcast with Tiffany Dowd. She's the founder of Lux Social Media, and she does social media and marketing for luxury boutique hotels. And I've actually had the pleasure of working with her, as we were chatting earlier, about doing multiple things for the last 14, 15 years now. I've worked with her in some capacity. But she said something to me, and then she said it on the episode as well. But when I was a junior in college, when we first met, I was thinking about moving to New York, and I was from Texas, and I had, traveled a little bit, but I had lived in Texas my whole life. And she said to me, Texas will always be there for you. It was like she unlocked a gate of my future. It just hit me straight to the heart. I was like, oh my gosh, like, you're right. Texas will always be there for me. And so I always share that with post-grad, recent post-grad, or those who are even junior, seniors in college. It's like, whatever it is that you want to do, if you're nervous, if you're concerned about taking that leap, heading into the dream city or whatever it might be, wherever you're concerned about leaving, it'll always be there for you. It gave me such peace. And I haven't lived in Texas for almost 10 years now, but it's just that hit me. And so she's fantastic. I also think of episodes, Lindsay Zorick, who is the founder of the Avenue. She let us in on her experience in losing her mother. So there's lots of different moments that come up that I'm like, oh my gosh. We've also had guest Tella Mercantile, who's coming on here shortly, Sarah Lawson. She shared about a traumatic experience of a boat accident. So guests surprise you. And I think that's why people like How'd She Do That? I think it's why I like it. It's because you actually get the full picture of someone's life. We've had women who've been divorced and have shared about that experience. And we've had women open up and you're like, wow, I would have never known that from your beautiful, glossy interior design photos that this happened to you or that this happened to you. I think apart from the, those big moments that really set my life up for a different trajectory, like a Tiffany quote, when people open up and share things that I wasn't expecting, I have such just immense amount of respect when they do that.
Right. Well, okay. I have two things to respond to about that, and I'm hoping I don't lose the second one. The first one is that idea something's always there for you too. I would think it's also interesting if you even flip it around a little, right? And it made me think of Lindsay, like you said, of what are the things that will not always be there for you? And then almost how if that could help you make decisions or choices or prioritizing things or something. It's a lot of places, right? A place will always be there for you versus people or versus even opportunities. Because I think that's hard a lot, right? Is when you're kind of like, could I do this later? And some stuff you could always learn pottery.
Right.
If you're like feeling dead set on needing to go to the wheel or something, like you could do that. I think you'll see soon, right? When you have young kids, sometimes it's like, I should do this thing or volunteer with this thing.
Right.
And then, at least in my experience, you have to almost walk yourself back. You're like, this is not the time to dive into this side project.
Right.
Because of all these other reasons, it will always be there for you. Versus I wonder if you see something, it could be like, it won't. This thing is in front of me and presented.
So
Yeah.
I like flipping it.
I like flipping it too, and I think it does go into the theme of motherhood. I think of Caroline Boykin, who's an incredible artist out of the Carolinas. She has two young girls, and I believe in her episode, and even now, that was her art and having a studio and being able to manage her own time and resources was a key element of her stepping into full-time artistry. And I think a lot of women, they look at the time frame of children and they say, okay, what are the things that I can be doing now to continue to really hone in on my skill set, things I love, things I'm passionate, things I enjoy, but I can be home at 2 if needed, or I can get home by 3, or I can have the morning to myself and then see the kids. So there's definitely a theme of entrepreneurship paired with the timeline, specifically of children, I think, and flexibility to go see parents, to go see a loved one, and I think that's the trade-off that people have to really think about. On the flip side, we have corporate ladies who've come on as well. Janelle Tevis of Bugaboo, she was just recently on. Her episode was fantastic. And you look at her and you see how it works for her to have a very rigid schedule. So it really is interesting as we think holistically about all these different women, what has inspired them and motivated them in their given field.
Right. Well, and what you were saying too reminded me of a piece of advice. I have no recollection of who told me this and what it was for. A random conversation, an in-kind magazine story. I don't know.
I'm sure.
But it was kind of that idea, the flexibility of
Mm.
how people decide what they're doing. Whomever this person was, shout out to you. It was like reminding people, if you have that kind of job on accident or because you've designed it, to take advantage of it. Because I think a lot of
Right.
people have it and then they either feel guilty about running out to a kid thing, or like we'll talk a lot sometimes too about people need, how do you inject a little bit of mental health is probably not really the right term, but it's like you go outside for 5 minutes and you put down devices and you take walks. And so
Right.
many of us, if you've built a world where you work from home or if you work for yourself, you can do that. We had a member who she was saying, she put it in our chat and it was interesting to me where it was like, because I think we all probably do this. You're driving around, you see like 2 friends walking and you're like, oh, I'm so jealous. Or like those women probably don't have to work or they're just whatevering.
Right.
And then you could be that person 2 days later and you're on a conference call walking or whatever. I feel like her point was kind of like she has enough control over her schedule. She could block it and say, you know what, on Friday I'm going to like move meetings back or take a
Right.
call while I'm walking. You mentioned I love walking and talking to people like on
Love.
calls.
Yes.
And so it's, if you have the flexibility and you've worked for it, take advantage of it. And I thought that was such good advice too
It is.
for like your workday and setup.
It is. It totally is. Because to your point, I think, and a lot of women, again, it goes back to what are you looking at for value? Is it, I have to meet this? And I think the other thing too, and I've loved this theme, there is some of these women have flexibility around finances, whether they have a partner who's working or they're living in a way that, their means are met through not aggressively needing to focus in on that. And then that gives them the opportunity, like you said, to have that grace. But we've had a couple mother-daughter duos on where their mom actually has really set them up for success. And then the daughter comes in and says, Mom, we've got to update social. We've got to update web. We've got to think this way. We've got to be more boutique and strategic on our product, which is what Foster did. Frances came in and did that for her mom. So it's just really fun to think back and to think about, again, a holistic view of all of these different women moving things forward and attempting to get things started, launch, or continue on a legacy brand.
Yeah. Well, the mother-daughter thing reminds me too of one of the conversations actually at the Southern Sea that I thought was so fascinating, was reminding people of generational brands, probably a lot of mother and daughters, how it's kind of like when you have these conversations, and I think you can extrapolate something even bigger, right? That everyone can bring something to the table. Because I think with social media and technology, I already feel like such an old lady, and it's kind of, it can be easy to feel like, I think people who perhaps own a brick and mortar for
Right.
decades, that they have no idea what's happening or whatnot. And it's like, no, any of these conversations, whether we're in a big room all talking together, I'm sure the mom and daughter, it's tricky for lots of reasons, but almost to remember that it's not like this person is old and they have no idea. Like there's this whole wealth of knowledge about
Right.
customer service or support or curation or brand building that has nothing to do with an algorithm.
Right.
And I think that's like a good piece of very solid advice, period, of like, we can have this conversation. And I tell Diana members that it's like, we come into this conversation because you never know what, like, you could learn something. You're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Tell me more.
Yes.
And then, right. And 5 minutes later, you're sharing something and it's just unexpected often. I
Totally.
think it's so beautiful when we just like don't have preconceived notions, I guess, over like, I won't be able to contribute or that person, like,
Right.
I'm not listening to anything they have to say.
Right. And legacy brands and even women who are in a generation ahead of us or even 2 generations ahead of us, they actually have experienced the real life connections that we are attempting to create on social media. We are in our DMs. I'm DMing everybody back. I'm like, thank you so much for this stroller recommendation. Thank you so much. I'm attempting to make those connections. These women made those connections at pop-ups in the, 60s and 70s. So, and their first customer, their granddaughter is now wearing the brand. So it's like, wow, there is such a wealth of knowledge there. And they tapped into something that we're desperately trying to recreate.
Right. No, totally. Okay, and you mentioned Janelle, who I think is so amazing to follow on social. She seems like such a good, interesting example. So often I think we're fed founders and like startup people, and it's like
Absolutely.
the corporate kind of exec has gotten so less glossy or whatever. And I think she does a really
Totally.
good job. She presents it really well. And so I'm curious if she also had specific takeaways and or just thinking back to that idea of the corporate space.
She's fascinating. And do listen to Janelle's episode, the CEO of Bugaboo. She was amazing. I think for me personally, too, I'm currently in a corporate role. And so I navigate, even as we're recording, thinking, okay, where do we align with like a lunch break or what have you? And I have like 8 Zoom calls a day, and maybe one of them is a podcast recording, So that's the stage of life I'm in, which is really interesting. As people follow me on social, may not realize that. But it was a role that came to fruition 2 years ago that was just too good to pass up. And so I, too, am looking at the corporate space like, okay, what are the benefits here? Of course, a consistent salary is key for many. But with Janelle, I love that you even said glossy, because she has made it like, oh my gosh, okay, we can do this. Now, the rigid work that she puts into her schedule is beyond impressive. I mean, she's up at 5 a.m., 5 to 5:30, doing a little workout. She wants to see the kids before they head out, that kind of thing. But her take, I think, on corporate goes back. She was in Europe for some time at Nike, and she grew there, and she had mentors throughout her career that really grew her. And I think for her, the thing that I find so impressive that is also potentially lost on some of our younger entrepreneurs is the type of communication she utilizes since she is corporate. Even in our discussion, she was very, and this is just her, she's so smart. Her answers were concise. They were pointed. Everything she said was helpful. It was like, how is it that everything that you're coming out of your mouth is helpful? And with entrepreneurs, we may not have honed in on that style of communication, which is corporate.
Yeah, I'm like, I need to know the how, because I'm like, that's been the feedback I've gotten from my job where it's like, you could just stop and you keep going. You're like, well, how though? Like, but you're right.
It was fascinating. You guys really need to listen to her episode. I think, it's been fun too, even early on when I would speak with different women, I would realize they had another role. Some of them, this was years ago. This was probably 5 years ago. I don't know that this is a theme that we would still see as much. We'd get off the call and they'd say, yeah, and I still have my other role. And I'm like, I wish you had said that.
Yeah.
I wish you had said that, because it doesn't take away. If anything, I find it really impressive. The fact that Janelle's growing her social media, and there's others like her, but she's really the one to watch, I think, given even the life stage she's at and what have you. But I always thought, I wish you had said that. I wish you had said, that you do this and you do that. But I don't know if there is a desire to make it seem as though, your affiliate links just are constantly popping off or what have you. It's like, no, tell us, like, let us know.
Have you interviewed Hitha Palapu?
No, but I love her name.
She would be so good and is so cool.
Okay.
And she leans into the multi-hyphenate thing. We had her. She's actually a Diana podcast.
Amazing.
And that's really what I want to talk
listen.
about. Because it's exactly what you're saying, where people introducing yourself can be hard, period.
Right.
Introducing yourself when you do multiple things can be hard when you aren't paid for one of them, but it speaks to your soul. And so we talked for that a lot. And I think kind of, you're right, her thing to those people too. It's like, own it. It's amazing. And Nora Raj Brown leads kind of like edit stuff at Goop. And I remember we chatted for a newsletter, and she was saying kind of when she interviewed for that job that Gwyneth Paltrow thought it was really cool. Her editorial background, she did ad sales and marketing and also wrote. And it was just so like cool because she had a Gwyneth mention.
Yes.
Also, if it's like the right people, you're right, we'll think it's amazing that you're building some A and B and on the side. And people who are threatened by that or don't get it, it's kind of like, I feel like to not let that get you down or whatever, because you're right, it's massively impressive. They are able to compartmentalize. They're able to seize time.
Right.
They are driven enough to do that. And that, yeah, someone will see it and be like, no, 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 sister, like that's not a bad thing. That's an amazing thing.
It's a great point. And even with the corporate role that I stepped into at Pepperdine, I mentioned to my vice president as well as our CMO, I said, well, I have a very popular podcast I'd like to continue, on. And my answer from the VP was, of course, didn't even think twice. Of course, to your point, the right people. The right people will be impressed. They'll be excited that you're doing that. But I relate to that because the entirety of my life, I've had multiple roles post-grad because I met Tiffany.
Multi-hyphenate.
I'm multi-hyphenate, but I remember the identity crisis I would have. And what I would say, it's funny, depending on who the person is, depending on where I was, I may give a different response. I may give a shorter response, or I may, read the room and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of creatives here. I'll talk about the podcast. I won't say the corporate side, and I still kind of do that. And it is interesting to try to share who you are but do try. If you're listening and you've struggled with that, do try to say as much as you can.
I would just like to applaud you, and I feel like it's good advice too, that you told them when you interviewed that you have a very popular podcast. Because I think people diminish it. Like, I'm so happy you did that instead of being like, I do this thing on the side. Like, it's just
right. Well, and I think I wanted to be upfront, and I think in corporate, and I loved Janelle and others, like, communicating to your corporate role, you are my priority. You are my priority. And if you see things on social media, you are my priority, and you can know that I'm prioritizing you. But at the same time, this is a non-negotiable. I will be continuing to do this, and I will be carving out the time to do it because this is something I'm passionate about and I love, and I want to continue to see grow. And so it was nice. And then the other interesting thing about being in a corporate world with a presence on social media, like I know my team members have seen my stuff. They may mention, some are real friendly with it and they'll DM me, and they'll talk to me about it at work. And then others I just know are like, just watching a little bit. Quiet lurkers, but potentially, I think they're fine with whatever they're seeing. But it is interesting having a large team. I have, I think I have 7 team members under me. So some of them will engage with the online presence and some will keep it, in person, which is also interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it would be advice I would give people, nothing I've received. But that idea, if you're thinking about urging the two or starting something, is to really remember how much it makes the other thing better. Either because you've learned what you're learning here, you can apply in ways that I think surprise you, even if you're like, you're clearly not doing a podcast for Pepperdine, but what have you learned? You apply. And then I think the other like less tangible part is when I was trying to work through this on my own, it was like your side thing or your extracurricular personal business, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
It scratches so many itches that makes you better at your other job just because you're not pining for a place to interview interesting women and express yourself. That's like never going to happen in your corporate job.
Totally. It does. And on the flip side, it's interesting because the corporate role also provides that stability, that high touch. Like my husband would say, I leveled up so much in the past 2 years because I had to. The people I'm communicating with are academics. They're not female founders trying to figure it out, and my husband is like, you have become so much more professional, which then on the flip side helps me with the podcast, be able to say no, be able to say not right now, be able to say this isn't the direction we're headed in with more confidence than I likely would have without the corporate oomph that I've experienced and grown in.
When you have a job that's paying the bills, it gives you such freedom to pursue your other thing without the need to find sponsors or post affiliate links when it doesn't feel right. And I think that is great advice if anyone was thinking about leaving their paying job or a salary job or whatever, that it's like, don't forget that's a massive, massive bonus that you can pursue it knowing what's important to you and what feels right and stay the course instead of being like, well, I have to do this because I have to make money.
Agreed. I completely agree. And I think that's something that I've even navigated in the future. It's like, even if I did have the podcast as my sole thing, I would want to be having other things going on because I have even found the longer or the more time and attention I put into the world of social media and not my true physical world present, here I am, friends, family, or phone calls with friends like you, and I'm just scrolling or I'm just looking, that's where to me, the negative sides of social media come out, where it's like, if your entire hope is on an app and you haven't diversified into a way that you can be free to do other things, you can be free to not speak out when you don't want to. Even this week, Prime Day was this week, along with the Texas floods. It's like, I don't want to utter a word about Prime. I have absolute respect and understanding for those who must make an income this week. But personally, as I think about it, I'm like, gosh, I can't do that. And then even this week, we didn't have an episode go out. I wasn't beholden to a sponsor this week. And so there's no episode. I didn't want to talk this week. I didn't want to say anything. So there's a benefit to that diversifying if you can hold on to a role that isn't totally life-sucking to continue to pursue these other things and put it all into place. That's always been my biggest recommendation to people.
Yeah. And it's like all of what you're saying too, it's like the overall goal for all of us is your like holistic, super pulled back into the day life experience. Even if it feels, strategy of mapping it out and a growth plan and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, but if you feel your soul needs some restorative, not posting an episode this week, that's more the goal. More will benefit you than like chugging on and forcing yourself to do it. And I think keeping an eye on that is so important.
It is. It is. It is.
Okay. I thought of 2 work advice pieces I'm going to share.
Good.
When I was in the editorial world, we did a lunch and learn with Joanna Coles, who was at Mary Claire for a really long time. And super small piece of advice I've always thought of is she said when you introduce yourself, you use your first and last name. That men do it all the time. And we're like, hi, I'm Emily. Hi, I'm Leah. And I think about it constantly. And especially it interests me in a room where you'll go around, everyone says, I'm Em, I'm Sarah. And I say my full name like a goober.
No, you should.
And it makes sense.
Interestingly enough, I do that, Leah. I do that too. I say Emily Landers. And if my husband's there, I say Emily and Luke Landers. And I remind people. And even this week, it was fun. We ran into a guy who he's actually on the show Full Swing. And we've been connected to him in the past. And my husband, who never does stuff like this, he was like, hey, man, what's up? I saw you on Full Swing, whatever. We're at Air One and we're going to take their table. And he got up and we had met in the past and they were connecting and stuff. And at the end, I said Emily and Luke Landers. And when I said our full names, he goes, yeah, he literally said, yeah, when you said your names, your full names, I knew you guys. So it's so smart. And I love too that you mentioned, like, of course, any man, it's like, da, 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 da. And we're like, Claire, Emily, Jessica. It's like, no.
I know. Well, and it's like, because either you're right, just if you're bad with names, hearing that full name jogs you. If names, unless you have some crazy Madonna kind of one person name, there are other ones. And I think I love branding. I love personal branding feelings. And I'm like in that case, just feel so convinced that that's going to become even more and more and more important as like AI
I think so too. No,
whatever.
No, I totally agree. And I think those listening, try it. If you're like, whoa, I've never done that, try it because it does put an oomph behind you. I'm using oomph a lot. There's lots of oomph in this conversation today, but it does. It's like, okay,
we're here.
Yeah, we're here. And it does. People do recall it. They really do.
Yeah.
This is a life thing. This is a social media thing. This is a work thing. Attempt to think the best of people. Attempt. I had a situation yesterday where I received an email that perturbed me. The individual was in office and I went over to them to ask some additional questions instead of emailing. And that is what I do. If I get an email that perturbs me or that is frustrating to me, I will go and find you. I will not address the email, but I will give us a new memory. I will give us a new positive memory together because I didn't want to hear your email like that. So I think social media too, I actually even recently, I'll share this last week, I was sharing about the Texas floods and I received a hideous DM and it was equating my communicating about the Texas floods as just disgusting and self-absorbed. Very, very strange DM. I wrote them a nice note back and then I blocked them. And I can assume the best of them, but it was a female founder with a business. And I'm at a stage in my life, you're going to be blocked. So I think the best of you, but I will block you. The high stress and lots of news. And I don't know exactly what possessed her to do that, but I don't have time for that. But I will think the best of her and think, gosh, okay, she must not know me. She must have not followed me for very long because she would know that's not my intention. No, but then the email element, it's funny because people can be so brave in email. If you go up to their desk or say, hey, you have a minute, I wanted to just, it's, all ego's gone, that face to face.
Instagram or social stuff like that is that times a million. And often I appreciate when people will share it kind of like I post like, I did showing that where you're like, that's insane. And then sometimes their responses, because you could learn from seeing how someone gracefully responds.
Right.
And then I think you're right too. If it's like at the end of the day, you have to protect your own headspace, energy space, emotional space, whatever space to do the blocking thing. And it seems like people do that a lot. Kind of, here's my response that isn't inflammatory or like, now we're going to
Right.
fight. And
Right.
now we're done.
Right. And now you're gone. But yeah. And I think people equate it to, someone coming into your home or what have you. And I really do abide by that. I do think that's the case. You can't go to someone's account. So I think for me, most recently, it is think the best of people first and foremost. This individual has something going on, whether it be an email, whether it be a DM, whether it be a strange in-person encounter, which those are usually harder to find. People are not as brave in person. But then, so think the best. But then to your point, make sure that you have the confidence to create the space to say, okay, bye. We've got Carissa Wilder, who's been on the show, lost her daughter. She's been very candid on social media. And she was getting so many different messages. I just told her, block. I said, post their account. If it's really disturbing and you're really like, what the heck? Post the username and block. That's what I told her. She gets crazy stuff. But I even think of like Brighton Butler, who we're friendly. She hasn't been on the show, but just even her DMs, I'm like, I cannot imagine. She'll DM me sometimes. I'm like, I cannot imagine the things you get. And it really does. I think to your point, you do think of these folks and you're like, good for you. Wow. Good for you to stand up and to I mean, it's wild. But also if you have a corporate role, you actually don't have to be at that level. For me to get anything strange online, it's very rare. And it's because I am not beholden to social media as a career.
Right. What you're saying is very specific to emails or DMs or whatever. But I think it's often I try to remind myself or friends, or if you're ever in this situation, that exact idea of you don't know what's happening in someone else's life. When you think back, it's like, let's theorize. It could be they have a family member who's really sick. They're dealing with fertility issues.
Yes.
Something that you don't know that's making them snappy or aggressive or mean or whatever. And my piece of advice was I think you probably know this about me. I love chatting with people.
Yes.
Especially like strangers, I get really deep. If someone's at my house doing work and we had a kitchen problem, so there was a painter, so they're there for like a few days.
Yes.
And I'm like, I feel like at the end, it's emotional when you have to say goodbye kind of. And it was this wonderful painter. I don't know what we were talking about, but it was kind of what you said, where I think he told me he tells his children who are now, adults, or it was like, people 98% of the time do not mean to be malicious. They're having a bad day. They're all those things we just talked about. And I think it's like, I already knew that, right? Probably a lot of we know that, but to hear someone say it, and now I think of this painter in my house on a ladder, a lot of them is this smart old man, a kind of a father figure where you're like, you're right. How much? And I think, the world, as it gets crazier and crazier, that to me so often is the bottom line thing of like, people are so quick to just be like, this person is a horrible monster, idiot.
Right.
Maybe that's like life advice I feel like we should all remember. It's so big yet so simple, right?
Totally. I completely agree. I did an episode one time after getting an interesting review, and I had shared very early on, 5 years ago when I started the podcast, I said, guys, my biggest fear is negative reviews. That was like the thing that I was most concerned about. And some businesses, like, I honestly can't imagine having a product and getting a negative product on something that I created. But I shared, that was something that was going to be a real hurdle for me. And I did a whole episode and I shared the review and I talked about it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So there's also that you can take pause, and even in any work environment, to their desk, if you'd like, say hello, bring a positive memory back like I did yesterday, and remind yourself that individual's not the scary keyboard warrior or what have you. But also get ready. If you put yourself out there, if you stand for something, if you share your opinions, then that opens it up too. So it's just, it's something that you have to kind of embrace. And I think it goes back to having that real life, those real life connections, those real life friendships. Don't stay in the weeds on social media as much. If you're growing, take time to step away. That's not the real world. The people you meet from it, they're the real world. But if it's a DM, you don't know this person from Adam, that's not the real world. It's okay.
Right. It reminds me of like pre-pandemic when you worked in an office all the time. It was like, pick up the phone instead of going back and forth on email, either because if temperatures rise or something, or just how easy you're like, this will be so much faster. And like at the first hour, right? Everyone had a desk phone. You press an extension, which feels now so old. I don't know if you get to use extensions at work and just
we have extension.
I'm very jealous. But like, I guess the advice, right, is just diffuse. So if it's frustration or anger, or just if it's like, whoa, this is getting so complicated and unwieldy, can we just quickly call or have
Yeah.
a 5-minute sync up or something. And I
It's so
wonder
much better.
if that's probably applicable to like lots of things too,
Yeah.
beyond a
Well,
work.
I've even had, it's a great point. I've even sent off voice memos to women who have messaged me something ugly or accusatory. Not really ugly. I don't get ugly notes really, but I have sent voice memos to say, "Hey, thank you so much. I didn't hear that in the episode. This only happened one time. Someone mentioned something that was said in an episode by a guest. I'm very team guest. Like my guest, I would never say an ugly word about them. I don't have many stories that are even that like that. I've had other people come to me later and say, "Oh, that person was on a show. Oh, she's a, and I'm like, well, she wasn't to me, so I can't agree with you on that." But I've had people who've reached out and said, I felt like I couldn't believe she said that. It sounded like she meant this. And then what I will do is I'll listen back myself and I'll think, okay. And then I actually looped my dad into one. I was like, "Can you listen to this and see if it sounds like what this listener's saying?" And he said, I did listen and it did sound like she was saying that. You might want to edit. I'm like, okay, Dad, if you feel that way, thank you. Cause I'm so robust in and aggressive in protecting my guest. And like, they come on to talk to me like, "No, it was fine. That's not what she meant, blah, blah, blah." But my dad was like, "If you don't know her, that does kind of sound like it." I'm like, okay, let me go ahead and make that edit. No problem. And I voice memoed that individual. I said, "Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for letting me see. I did actually have a few other people listen in. They agree. We're going to edit." And that's a lot. That's the only time I've actually ever even done that. But I do take all of that very seriously. And I think you have to be able to see different sides to do that. You can't be so staunch, right, wrong, this, that. You have to be open. And even as you get, critiques online, sometimes there might be some truth in them that you can learn from. That's the most painful ones.
Right. Well, it's like, and then it's not being defensive and not letting your ego kind of lead the whole thing. Right. Wait, I was just thinking of something else I wanted to say too. I think over all those years of working as we get older,
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of bosses and reviews and those kind of conversations. I think the one other thing that really stuck with me that I try to use a lot too is that you don't ever go to people with a problem, right? If a problem that you've already thought through a solution. That was something or someone more senior than me kind of advised when I was struggling with something. I thought it was so smart too. Some problems, I guess you have to put in a manager or boss's door. But if the best employees in whatever sense, it's like they're people who might spot problems and then can proactively or very smartly. And I think it's protecting maybe yourself even of kind of like, here's what I've thought then, or here's how we could fix this. And I always really like that.
It's very smart. And I'm like, "Ooh, gosh, I need to take that to mind." Because sometimes I'm so in the loop on things and I'll just share with my boss, this happened, with no bow for him to be like, "Okay, thank you for handling." It's just like, I'm just filling him in. So I like that. It also makes me think of actually a situation that happened to me this week where there was a circumstance at work that I needed to communicate with someone. And with some guidance from others, we decided that wouldn't necessarily be the best route. So I presented a new route. I said, "This is what I'm going to do instead of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to equip this team member to communicate this because that's going to be the better route." So I like that, to be able to say, even if there is, an encouragement or a directive from someone at work, your boss, or, a higher up that's communicating, this is the next step that you need to take. It's like, okay, I might know more dynamics. I might know more relational dynamics, what have you. So then it's like, thank you. Perhaps in my case, I even said, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. Coming back and saying, I'm actually not going to do that. Thinking through some of the details. What I will be doing is this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same idea, but I like even from the very beginning to have the next steps. That's really smart.
You're saying it sounds also like a more of a senior level kind of thing too, especially in a corporate place, right? There's going to be some level where if some super junior person was like, no, I'm sad. I'd be like, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah.
Do that.
No. You are doing that. Yes. It is more of a senior level and a little bit more strategy and a little bit more relational, even given my title with client in it, I have to think about the relational side of things. But I think, one thing I've learned from the show and from HSDT and from all of our guests, the relational element. And I've been grateful, we've had guests share breakups of founders. We've had guests share insight into lawsuits that have happened and things like that with their businesses, briefly. And I think that the relational element, is everywhere. Even as we were talking about social media, staying friends with people that you meet like us. Choose those relationships wisely because they're going to benefit you personally, but they're also going to benefit you professionally.
Well, I think within like kind of the Diana orbit and community and what that whole thing is, it's a lot of networking. We talk about this a lot where I'm like, networking needs a rebrand, right? Because it's it feels self-serving and quid pro quo-y, at least for women. Maybe men are like, what are y'all talking about? I think it feels very icky, but it's kind of what you're saying. It's like, no, when networking is done well, it's it makes your soul happy. It's good in all these ways. And it means, I think you're right, staying in touch, understanding how you organically can support someone. Life outlook is it's all quid pro quo. It will all work out in the end some way, but not doing it just for the quo.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. No, I mean, I think of Margaret Boyce of Jay Lowry, and I think of Jamie, who's her founder. I think of Caroline Bramlett, LCB Style. I think of all these women who were listeners of the podcast. I think of Noble 31 out of Fort Worth. These women who I so admired. They came on the podcast. Then we meet in person. It's like, I love these girls. If I'm around, if I'm in their city, I'm going to let them know, Back to something you and I have always talked about and something that's amazing that you're doing with Diana is making social come to life. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like being able to meet women that you felt connected to and then meet in person and realize that connection was totally real and will continue on. I mean, there's nothing like it. So even if you're thinking about starting something, even if you're hearing our conversation, you're in a corporate role and you're like, but I wanted to kind of start this, start being social online in that fun, positive way. And I'm telling you, when you meet people in real life, it all comes to fruition. You're like, this is why I even started this.
Okay. The idea of networking, and I think actually I interviewed you for an in-kind story about this too. When we get asked for things, how have you been asked that works? How do you not? Because that's something that I think is so fascinating. And it's like, I don't know the answer to really give people as advice, but sometimes when you want to help, love networking, either people when you don't know them well and are asking for something, how could people present themselves in a way that might get an answer? Or sometimes even people I know well, I think where it's like, hey, do you know, I don't know, Emily, like, can you introduce me to her for the podcast? I think I've tried to be like, I'm happy to do that. Can you lay out in bullets, what is it about your company? Or what do you think, that's compelling that you, because I think that there's something to it that when, especially if it's someone have met offline, that it's like you're putting so much onus on this person to do all this legwork. It's like, hey, sister, I'm happy to pass this on, but can you help me out? Like, I can't.
100%, I think we would probably laugh at the amount of requests that we've had. And it's quite flattering. It shows that, wow, what we are doing is being recognized and the networks we've built is, people would like to tap into it. I've done introductions to a wide variety of guests. I've done lots of kind of behind the scenes things, just the, fun of doing that. I think I've told you this in the past. I used to speak at sororities. I would harp on informational interviews. I'd say, this is the best thing you can do for your career. It's how I met Tiffany, who I mentioned with Lux Social Media, and many others that I've had on the podcast. It's just a great way to start building your network. With that in mind, at these sorority talks, I would give them the list of questions that I would give, and I would say, and guys, at the end of my informational interviews, I say, who do you know that I should know? And then you get to get one of their people that's high up on their list, because they're not going to give somebody to you and say, hey, you can talk to this person that they don't know, right? Now, I had to stop doing that because all of these sweet, amazing, wonderful, smart girls would come to me and say, without any knowledge, I don't know you, I don't know anything about you, I don't know what you love, I don't know anything about your personality. They'd say, well, Emily, who do you know that I should know? And it's like, okay, well, I can't have hundreds of people asking me who I know that you should know because I don't know you. I've also had folks, and we are working on this, which will be amazing, but I have had folks say, hey, can you help us with an event in Malibu? And it's like, okay, well, hold on, I'm not, what am I doing here? I'm not an event planner. How can I kind of help? But in special situations, I'll be like, absolutely, all in, let's go. But there have been lots of requests for that. So you have to be able to kindly say no. If you are going to someone, I love what Leah said about doing that prep work, because it is such a friendly thing to be like, hey, can you introduce me to blah, blah, blah? And what people may not realize is when blah, blah, blah's world gets so large, the amount of requests that you get in this way it can be overwhelming. It can be very much not timely. Back to our point on thinking the best of someone. If they don't get back to you for a while, really do assume they get a lot of these. And some people, they may not respond. We attempt to respond to all of them, but I think the main takeaway is what you shared, Leah. Do the prep work, or even say, hey, Leah, could you introduce me to Hannah, or could you introduce me to Emily? Here's why I want to be introduced to them, and here's how it could benefit them. That
Right.
would be huge. If you could add, like, at the end, it would benefit Emily to chat with me because I want to send her something. Or, then there's a little bit of like, oh, wow, that's really thoughtful. I want to connect with that person. That was really thoughtful of them.
Right. And it's so much easier to do the introduction. If I said, hi, this is so-and-so, they're doing this. They thought you'd be amazing for this. I'll let you take
Totally.
it from here.
Exactly.
And that when you were talking about the events, that also reminds me of something we've talked about in Diana, even if people will talk about pricing as consultants and like, how do you present your pricing or whatever. And I think the general piece of advice to pull out from that is, even if you're not a consultant sharing your rates, just to communicate. And the money thing was so interesting, where it's like, if I'm upfront, and this is a member saying this kind of with what my rates are, it cuts out back and forth. And then at the end, someone's telling them a quote and they're like, oh, wow, that's too
Right.
much. They also made this nice point where it's like, it can help someone kind of save face in a way. If you go down this process and it's like, that's $20,000 and someone has to, it feels awkward to be like, oh, well, I
I
can't.
can't
And
do
it's just out of
20.
their budget,
Yeah.
And so that was really smart. And then even we've talked about with helping, have to be really upfront of like, how can I help you? You feel bad too if you didn't. You're like, I didn't even realize you wanted me to share it on social or invite. It was about my
Right.
network. I just thought you wanted me to like interview you about this thing. But I think when you're nice, you don't want to almost ask for too much. And I think that advice there is like, just ask, lay it out clearly, and you can do it
Yes.
politely, but it's going to help everyone to be very clear.
Yeah, clarity is kindness, especially with someone
Right.
who has a schedule. If you're actually all of us can go in that category of like hectic, crazy schedules, 30-minute availability here, XYZ. So consider that and just have that mentality of clarity is kindness. And yeah, to your girl's point, to your woman's point, it's like, give us the straight up elements, and that way you can cut out a lot of, because there's nothing worse than getting nearly to the end and then having a stamp of a budget or a stamp of something out of the blue that you're like, well, dang, now I'm the bad guy and I was actually not the bad guy. I was the guy who was going to help you. And now I'm the bad guy because I didn't hear that first and foremost. I love that point.
I think it's so smart. Another related thing, and I'm curious your take on it, or if you've heard anyone talk about this. I have noticed a few women recently who I think do such a good job when they have a project or something happening, emailing their network and being very clear too on here's how you can help me. Whether it's a bulleted thing almost. If you have a platform or a podcast, I'd love to be a guest. If you are doing an event, I'm a great moderator. I would like to, it's
Yeah.
very clear. And I think it takes a lot of confidence to ask.
Yes.
But it's also making it easier. Sometimes when you get it and you're like, I would love to help. Like, what can I do? And you almost made
Right.
it so easy for me. I can be like, well, I don't do that one, but this one I can do. And have you heard or seen, either received it or had a guest speak to you about that, of how they share kind of news or project and like almost activate their network? Because I think that's so hard.
To your point, much of this is on email. The number one thing I tell women when they say, what do you wish you had done differently? Or how do you wish you had started the podcast? What do you wish you had done? I would have wanted a newsletter and an email list from day one. I came in asking for emails probably 2 years in. The excitement around something new had passed. Just a lot of the fresh energy that you get with a new project at the very beginning is lost. So I would say that's my number one thing. Get an email list going. Get your newsletter, get your email list going. I think for guests, it's been interesting. A lot of them, they hit the ground running. I mean, they're on the pavement. I know a lot of women, if they can be in person, if they can pop by, or perhaps if they're at a networking event, they will utilize that time to clearly communicate, have that little elevator pitch, similar to your email example, but have that be the theme of their evening, and to say, I'm going into this event with the expectation of communicating this is what's happening. I'm going to follow people on social media while I'm standing there with them so I can follow up and start that kind of social relationship side of things. And so I think that's one way to do it too, is if you're out and about, put it at the forefront of even your conversations.
Yeah. Well, it all, I guess, comes back, bubbles up to, funnels up to,
Right.
whatever the ups to, The
Yes.
idea that advice is almost just to ask and to not feel bad about asking. I interviewed Eliza Licht. I think she's fascinating. I don't know if you've actually hit this at all. Sometimes I think when I talk to these women who are steps above me or more experienced, they're older, whatever, just
Right.
kind of in a different place. And I always feel like such a goober at the end where you're kind of like, if I could do anything for you, and then you realize you're like, what am I talking about?
Right.
And I think I did it with her, and it was almost like, yep, you can leave a review on Amazon for my book. And it was and I like posted on social, and then I messaged after. I was like, I hope that was okay with you, that I meant it
Yeah.
as an amazing thing, not a
Yes.
shade at all.
Right.
Because it was like, okay, and I did, and I posted, and it was just like this so little, but so big in that sense of how many times I think we feel uncomfortable about it, or we don't want to ask, or we think it makes us look needy, or maybe it's kind of what you were saying almost about like people don't want to mention their side job when we first started talking about that. It's like it makes it seem that you're not as glossy if you'd ask for help. And like,
Right.
I got a good email from Neha Rush when she launched the Power Pause. That was one of my first times of seeing it so organized, of not being ashamed to ask and to
Yeah.
say, here's what you can do. Here are 4 things.
Yep. It's amazing. I recall Molly Feening doing that, previous podcast guest. She's always great at that. And I think to your point, I think of My French Country Home founder, Sharon, who we had on very early on in the podcast. I think of Monica Rich Kozan, who has an incredibly luxurious line of jewelry. And it would be intimidating for me to ask some of those women. I even think of Angela of Little Spoon, who came on the show as well. It's like, I do anything for you, but they will have something. They do care and they do appreciate that sentiment. So I love that you're continuing that on, Leah. That's something I need to add in as well, because they will have something. They will have either a review or tell your friends or thank you so much. There will be something.
The piece of advice that I think was so fascinating was to almost find your own version of, I always want to call it a whisper network. And then I always Google what a whisper network is. And that's not what a whisper network is. But my version, that of like a group of people who you can almost, whether they're close friends physically or not, like internet friends, that you can unashamedly be like, hey, Emily, I just put out this podcast
Yes.
episode. Could you share it?
Yes,
like that
totally.
you don't have to feel bad or stupid. I think her point, and it might have been in her book, which is so good. Her second book I loved. But the idea of like, it's harder for you to be like, look at me, I won this award or I did this thing. But
Totally.
if friends do it, it's great. And that you can ask. And I just think that was such good advice.
You know who's really good at that on social is Sabrina Chazen. My friend Sabrina, she's down in Newport. She's been on the show. You guys would love her episode. She's really good at that. She's really good at saying, hey, I was excited about this brand. Can you go ahead and engage? Even engagement on social, that's key. Just asking for that as well and not being afraid to do so. And by the way, if you do that to others, if you are social on social, you can ask other people to be social on social for you. And I think that's something that people don't always realize. Gosh, Kristen Kennedy, right? What the heck? Kristen, you're so good at that.
I'm gonna be like, do you know Kristen? It's like a version of networking. What we're saying
It's
of like
incredible. I mean,
yeah.
No, and Kristen, you need to give us your tips because I will put something out and she'll put a genuine comment like, 5 minutes later, I'm like, you're amazing. And she's grown. She's not been on the show. I should have her on, but she's grown immensely, I think, through reels and but it's also impressive. So make social. Don't be afraid and be genuine, be yourself, have fun on it. We shared some negative elements to social, but in the end game, there's so much more positive and so much more good that can come out of it if you use it in the way that I've found a lot of women do.
Totally. And I think Kristen's such a good example of that. It's that simple that then when someone does it, anytime I see anything of hers,
yeah,
I will do it. And
same. It's like love.
I'm like a liker. I don't know if you've ever been around people when they're scrolling and they're kind of like, why? I was like, I don't know. I just like.
Yeah, me too. People will DM me things I liked. I'm like, oh, I like that. Okay, I guess I was in a mood to like that. Like,
I didn't realize. I thought that everyone just did that, but
I'm with you.
Just scroll and don't.
No. If we were scrolling together, we would both be liking. I'm a big liker. My likes come, and I do genuinely like it. So there you go.
Why would I follow it if I'm not going to like it?
Engage. I know.
You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, I don't even know what this is, but like I like her.
Yes,
I'm going to like it.
So to your point of asking, you can ask and people will show up.
Well, and I think that's good advice that we probably heard from different people in different ways. If you're trying to grow social or a brand or whatever, it's letting people feel heard is amazing. And I bet you're really good at this too. When someone DMs you to ask a question, right? Especially little things. When I see people who are big presences do it, I'm like, this is why you're doing so well. Or I think your community engages with you so much because they feel like they can send you a DM of like, did you hem those jeans? And you're going to respond.
Totally. This would be one of the biggest takeaways I'm having with social media right now as I'm having a lot of fun rolling out details around my first pregnancy. Oh my gosh. If you want engagement, ask people for advice. Oh my gosh. I'm going to be doing this until the child is 21 years old because I have never had so much engagement. And it doesn't have to be a big life event. You can say, what do you guys think of this brand? Or start those conversations and get ready to keep up on DMs. But I'm telling you, Instagram does notice that, even the private side of things. And
Yeah.
it will begin to get you more consistent because it sees you're utilizing the app in every area. So that's something that I genuinely just love hearing everyone's opinion about baby things, and I'm asking about it. But engagement engagement wise, find your questions, find what you want to talk about to people, put it out there. I'm telling you, if you haven't had a DM in your life and you ask a question, you'll start getting answers.
You've never been DM'd. Well, yes, I agree with you 100%. And I think if you pull it back, that's true for just brand building, right? Because that's my kind of paid day-to-day job too, right? And it's how I think it's so important for people to communicate with your shoppers, with people who are coming to you. It's like you answer those questions and you let them know that they hear you. I sent an email to Laline maybe 3 years ago. They styled something with a belt. And when you work in fashion too, you're like, I know that's clearly not their belt. And so they don't care if I find this belt. I sent them an email. Meredith Melling wrote me back being like, it's in this belt. And I was blown away.
Gosh.
I bought the belt then.
Yeah, of course.
To me, and as a marketer or as a shopper or someone who's interested, I was just so fascinated. And then I felt so special or impressed that this founder, even, you know what I mean? And then I think it builds loyalty and a deep connection with brands that are so important beyond just buying product. When it's like, this person heard me or whatever, I think it's true across the board.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree.
Ugh. Okay, we could talk forever. I made sure I jammed in my pieces of advice I thought ahead of our call. Was there anything about family or balance or personal life or building a brand or anything that you had thought of that you're like, shoot, we didn't get to share that one?
You know, a theme that it's interesting, and of course, a theme of my life right now is motherhood. I found it really interesting. Angela of Little Spoon. She is not a mom, and yet she is the founder of Little Spoon. When I found that out, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, wow. And she even she didn't correct me, but she kind of on the call, she's like, well, and I'm not a mom kind of thing. It should be inspiration for all of us to not try to put ourselves in specific boxes. And maybe that was wrong of me to assume that she was, but wow, her whole life is feeding babies. It's like, wow, that's amazing. But I think with that example and with others with the podcast where women have just surprised me in whether it be their interest or whether it be their season of life and the industry that they're in, it's amazing. And sometimes they don't align in the way that you would have thought. The encouragement here that I'm trying to get to is if you have a crazy idea and you're like, that's not really my season of life, or I don't really know that much about jewelry, or I'm not this, it's like, quit telling yourself that. Quit telling yourself that. You can be passionate about a wide variety of things and it can surprise other people. It doesn't matter. You can still be successful in it. You can still move things forward in a way that is genuine to you. And so I hope that's a good example. I remember finding that out and thinking, wow, okay, for her, what's fascinating and is just genius is the food industry was her first love. And then she went into this realm of, hold on, we don't have healthy baby food and we don't have actually easy, accessible packs and little things that moms could just probably carry along. So if you have an interest and you find that you're headed in a very specific niche area, you're probably on the right track because that's going to be where things really begin to align. So I just think that story is so cool.
And I love your kind of read on it, right? Because it just almost feels like it doesn't have to make sense.
No. We try to make brands make sense. We try to make our stories make sense. Even as you navigate motherhood, corporate role, entrepreneurship, you try to make it make sense for other people. Let's stop doing that. Make it make sense for you. I love that so much. Make it make sense for you because guess what? When your story pans out and everyone sees it, it's going to make sense to them. Don't try to get ahead of it and try to say it. Just go for it.
Right. Have you done human design?
No, I need to.
We just did a human
I immediately
design
know I need to do this.
You would really like it. We did a human design workshop in Diana. Kind of what you're saying, it was interesting where I am not a human design expert, but I think the way your chart or whatever breaks down, it's either gut or heart or head, maybe is how you make decisions. So we're not all the same too.
Wow.
So it could be maybe in people's brains, they're just like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm done.
Right.
And don't change it. Or it's a heart thing or it's a gut thing. So how people can be wired a little different. That just makes me think of what you're saying, where it's like, whichever one you are, sometimes you're like, this doesn't make sense, but my brain is telling me to do it, or my heart is telling me to do it, or my stomach.
Right.
You know?
And I think when people, I think of Rebecca Cohen, who came on the podcast, founder of Love Shack Fancy. When you see someone so intensely in love with what they're doing and it's so innate to who they are, it's crazy. It's crazy inspiring. I could potentially care less about what it is that they do in my life. I couldn't pursue that, but their passion for it is like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is so cool because of how much they love it and how enmeshed they are in what they've found to be their great passion and interest.
And I even like that piece of advice of like, if you had to sit down right now and think about what is the thing I'm really passionate about, one word or maybe two, like what's a phrase, what would it be? And then either like, yeah, and that makes sense because of XYZ, or if it doesn't, if you don't think about it too much, you like store it away and one day maybe it would make sense of, I like that as if you're either trying to make a decision or figure something out or just want to know more about yourself. Like, it's like, what is the thing? And I bet at some point you're going to be like, well, that's why.
The question I had to that extent, the first time I ever heard that idea, I was a junior in college, and it was around that conversation with Tiffany Dowd, who I've mentioned multiple times on the show. And someone said, what do you do in your free time? What lights you up? What are you doing on the weekends? It's a great, easy place to start.
Well, that's actually, I was going to tell you with Hitha and the multi-hyphenate thing, she encouraged us all instead of being like, what do you do? It should be like, how do you spend your time?
That's it. That's it.
Which is the same thing you're saying. You could
I love
answer that by working in, well, for pay,
right.
Monday through Friday, you can find me at Pepperdine
Right.
or whatever. Or it could just be like,
I love that. How do you spend your time?
Yeah.
And it also gives people permission to not feel, if they are in a season that they aren't working or they're not in their dream job or they're a stay-at-home mom, but they realize they didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom. And it gives people permission to not have that moment that they're like, I've been dreading this moment. This is why I don't talk to people.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you spend your time?
Said it on the call. Like, yeah, we are being part of a movement, guys.
Yes.
Like, we all need to start saying it.
I love it.
Doing it the way you want, but like give people the space.
Yeah. I'll join you guys in that.
You're in the movement with us.
I love it.
Well, this was the best.
As always.
Expected.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all your advice. It is like a treasure trove over there. And I know people can listen in and hear all of it. But I appreciate that super top line look even because you're just a knower of it all now.
No, I don't know about that, but I started this episode singing your praises. It's so cool when you see someone, you meet someone, you begin to get to know them, you stay connected to them, and it's just up, 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 up. And that's what I feel like is going on with you. So I'm excited to continue to see what's next for you. And thank you for the opportunity for me to step back and to say these names and to remember and to recall stories. And I really appreciated the conversation as well. So thank you, Leah.
Their stories are like a big part of your story. And thank you for being such a sunny place on the internet and Instagram and social, because what you do is incredible. But
thank you.
You're the best. We'll talk soon.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Leah. Bye.